Hi guys, I wanted to make this video about a topic I normally don't like to talk about, which some people find controversial. I don't, but there's a lot of noise these days about adopt, don't shop. And personally I feel it's absolutely ridiculous. Nobody should guilt you into the decision you want to make. If the right dog is from an animal shelter, and that's the right dog for you, fine. If the right dog is from a breeder for you because you're looking for a specific breed and you're looking for a purebred, not a mix, that's fine. Nobody should guilt you into adopting an animal. Now don't get me wrong, these animals are not at fault for winding up in these terrible circumstances. They're at fault because irresponsible people adopted them in the first place from a puppy mill breeder, not an ethical breeder, and then gave them up without any effort. Now, if we buy into this adopt, don't shop argument, there are two consequences of this argument. The first is that it's nonsense, because if every animal was to disappear from an animal shelter tomorrow, we still don't have enough animals to fill the need of the dog public. In other words, the dog buying public is hundreds of thousands of demand. If you fulfill, let's say, 30,000 out of 100,000, the demand for 70,000 remains. And I'm just using a mathematical example. These are not the actual numbers, but to illustrate a point. So there's a certain demand for dogs that cannot be met only through adoption. That's just a fact of supply and demand. The second problem I see is that if all of this adopt, don't shop mantra is true, and all our domestic dogs have been adopted, then why are we importing dogs from other countries into our animal shelters? If we believe in adopt, don't shop, then why are we increasing the pet population by taking unwanted animals from foreign countries into our country? A lot of these dogs have diseases that have to be embargoed. A lot of them have serious temperament issues. And most families can deal with some of these temperament issues. I've trained dogs in my life, quite a few. I'm 55, so I've had a long time to train dogs. And I've seen some serious behavioral issues. A lot of it is genetic. Fear aggression, fear biters. That's genetic. These dogs are poorly bred and bred indiscriminately. In other words, any male is paired with any female and let's make puppies. That's how you get bad dogs, because dogs are bred without health testing, without genetic testing, without temperament testing, without any yardstick to which to measure dogs by. So the second problem is, if this is such a problem for having unwanted animals in our country, why are we importing dogs from other countries into our animal shelters? So that's the second problem I see. Whereas with buying a dog from a breeder, you're getting a clean slate. You're getting a puppy, which is a brand new baby basically, that you're taking into your life. And you can start with a fresh slate. And if the puppy's been well bred, you don't come up with the disadvantages that come with a shelter dog that normally you might face. The other problem I see is that the argument that any dog will do, that mixed breed dogs and purebred dogs are identical in every way. Well, that's not true. If we stopped buying dogs from dog breeders, our pure breed dogs would disappear. For example, let's say you wanted an Alaskan Malamute and you wanted to pull sleds, which is what it was originally designed for. If you get a dog from the animal shelter and you hook it up to a sled, it may not be built for winter conditions in Alaska and have the strength to run for miles pulling a sled. The Alaskan Malamute has been bred with that in mind. Now, I'm not saying they're used that way right now, but that was the original purpose of the breed. Or let's say that you take a horse. You take a horse like an Arabian stallion. That horse is the product of hundreds of years of selective breeding. It's not just any horse, it's a little pony that will work. It is purposefully bred to exist in very hot weather conditions, have a lot of stamina. I think they're very beautiful horses. And the thoroughbred horse originates from the Arabian horse. You telling me that any horse will do? Or you take a Percheron, which is a big farm horse. You see the Budweiser commercials. Those big horses are called Percherons. Those were meant to work on a farm and pull heavy plows. Back before we had mechanized equipment and had tractors, horses tilled the soil. And if the horse didn't till the soil, the farmer couldn't plant his crops and the farmer starved. So a Percheron horse was bred to pull a plow. Now, would you hook up an Arabian stallion to pull a plow? No, you would hook up a Percheron. But would you make a Percheron run a race? No, you would have an Arabian. You see my point? Each breed of horse was developed for a specific purpose. The same thing is true of dogs. Now, my breed of choice is the German Shepherd. I breed German Shepherds. This breed, over time, developed into multiple subtypes. But generally speaking, all the dogs in law enforcement come from what is called Schutzhund dogs, or police dogs, and they come from the bite sports. They come from the Mondio ring, they come from Schutzen, they come from KNPV program in Holland. These dogs are bred to have the right drives, to then be, with the right training, to become police dogs. If we wanted any old dog to do it, and you're searching for drugs, with the local 5 mixed breeds mixed together, be suitable for that task? Probably not. So, if you believe in the adopt-don't-shop argument, you also believe in the disappearance of our purebred dogs. We live in a time when the internet allows instant communication across the globe. Let's say we go back only 40 years ago to the 1980s. My first dog was a dog out of the animal shelter. His name was Lasker. He was a Shepherd Collie mix. That was 1988 or 1989. So I think I was 21. That dog was one of the best dogs I ever had. He saved my life when I was jumped by 3 robbers. This dog bit the hand of the man having the knife in his hand. He saved my life literally. I wouldn't be speaking to you today if it wasn't for that dog. Now, he was an exceptional dog. But I wasn't guilted into adopting him versus buying a dog. Nobody should guilt you into a decision. Nobody should make you feel guilty for making the right decision for you and your family. Think about it. I will go a little bit into breeding later in this video, but I wanted to begin the conversation about adopt, don't shop, and I hope you think about what I said. Your loved one is lost in the woods, and you want a bloodhound to search for that dog, a German Shepherd or a Coonhound. All these 3 breeds are very good for search and rescue, right? Or would you want the mutt from the local animal shelter to search for your loved one, and their life dependent on it because it's freezing cold outside, and every hour counts in finding a loved one lost in the woods? So, the argument for purebred dogs is that not only do they have a certain look, coat, size, and temperament, but they were bred for a purpose. And so, if life is on the line, such as finding a loved one lost in the woods, do you want a bloodhound to search for your loved one? One of the best trackers out there? Or do you want any old dog searching for your loved one if it was lost in the woods? I would rather have a bloodhound. How about you? So, the argument of adopt versus buy is irrelevant, because if you're only saying adopt, then you're encouraging the irresponsible breeders which sell puppies as a puppy mill at the lowest possible cost, and the people who are buying them so cheaply are not much spent, not much lost. That's why I hate puppy buyers which are shopping for the lowest possible cost to buy a puppy. If you're looking to buy a puppy and you say, well, papers don't matter, I just want a pet. Or if I say, well, I can only afford $650 for a puppy. If that's all you can afford, how are you going to be able to pay vet bills if the dog gets sick? Maybe you shouldn't buy a puppy at all. Maybe you should buy a stuffed toy. Or some people want to buy a puppy as a Christmas present for their kid. It's not a stuffed toy that the kid plays with, gets tired, and then it's disposed once it's done being played with. It goes away from being smooth and small and cute to being large and big. It requires care. It requires housebreaking. It requires obedience training. It requires being walked on a leash to go outside. It requires exercise. It requires training. So before you take an animal into your life, think about it. Don't just buy an animal lightly and not think about what you're doing. And so those $300 puppies you find on Craigslist, those are the puppies you find in animal shelters 3 months later. So for people who are advocating to getting the cheapest possible puppy, I would argue, and I've seen Facebook groups where people are bragging about how they get the dog nearly for free and they're happy about it. Well, when you're advocating that the animal, which will live for 12 to 14 years with you, is the lowest cost your biggest criteria? Are you bargain shopping for an animal? Let's say you were to buy a car to drive your family in that has to last 100,000 miles. And I know buying an animal is not like buying a car, but let's say we're comparing to buying a car. Let's say you buy a car for $20,000 and you get 100,000 miles out of it, which is about 10 years, for average, let's say. Now, that 20,000 is amortized over 10 years. What that car got you as transportation focus over that time period. So if an animal lives with you for 12 to 14 years, don't you want the animal to be healthy in its old age and not to suffer from bad hips or bad elbows or genetic diseases? So responsible breeders do genetic testing of their dogs prior to breeding them. The ability to do tests with a company like Embark, which is not sponsoring this video, but the cost of genetic testing nowadays is about $100 to $110 per dog, and OFA hip x-rays are much more, maybe $750 in my area per dog. Could be more or less depending on the area you live in. But if you can't spend $750 for an x-ray of the dog's hips and elbows prior to breeding, why are you breeding? In other words, a professional breeder has to be able to be financially prepared for both the upside of the breeding and the downside and the risks. Some breeds, for example, like the French Bulldog as an example, can only be born by C-section. They have large heads and they cannot be born through the birth canal except by C-section. This also applies to other brachycephalic breeds like the British Bulldog. They require a C-section to be born. Last time I checked in my area, as of 2021, a C-section runs about $3,000, including anesthesia. Let's say your bitch, who is having the litter, develops her milk ducts are blocked, and she develops an infection, and her milk supplies comes out with pus. You have to give antibiotics to prevent the pups from eating spoiled milk and getting sick, right? At that point, you're bottle feeding 9 to 12 pups by hand. And that requires a lot of time and a lot of effort to bottle feed 9 to 12 puppies, which are all hungry and are all screaming to be fed. And you can't tell me you're not going to spend $500 to $1,000 to get rid of the infection that's coming out of her milk glands, right? While she's recovering from the milk supply being pus, you're going to feed those puppies, aren't you? Or at least you're supposed to. I have an acquaintance, not a friend, an acquaintance, whose dog developed a twisted intestine due to unsanitary conditions that he was feeding the pups raw meat, not washed, full of salmonella. The pup's intestine twisted, the puppy was near death. He went to the veterinarian, and the veterinarian told him it's going to cost $5,000 to fix it. He says to me, if it dies, it dies, and if it lives, it lives. I thought that was horrible. I thought such a person should never breed dogs. If you're not financially prepared for the downside as well as the upside of breeding dogs, you shouldn't be breeding dogs. It costs money to do genetic testing. It costs money to to have a whelping box. It costs money to have supplies to feed the mother dog. It costs money to raise the puppies, provide them adequate nutrition. So breeders are lucky if they break even. The bottom line is that breeding dogs for the love of the breed should be the motive to breed dogs. Those who breed dogs poorly are the ones who produce the lowest cost dogs, and if the customer demands the lowest priced dog, think about what it took to get you such a low priced dog in the first place. Then maybe you wouldn't be asking for such a low priced dog. Anyhow, I think I said enough about this topic, so don't talk about adopt versus buy. Dogs are bred for a specific purpose. If any dog will do, next time your loved one is in the woods and lost and is hungry and sick, ask yourself if you want a German Shepherd looking for your loved one, or any mutt in the animal shelter will do to search for your loved one when minutes count. And that will answer your question. Anyhow.